works right because I scheduled a live, but it doesn't seem to be connecting properly to what I had scheduled. So I hit the live button and, well, here I am. I'm going to just essentially start with my normal YouTube and talk about the markets and everything else because I'm not sure that the people looking for it actually found it. And I'm not sure how to interlink the one because I saw a couple people waiting to see the live stream. So maybe give me a minute. This is going to sound so stupid. I may go cancel that one. I wish I. Oh, here we go. A couple people are joining in. So I'm guessing it didn't connect properly to the one that I had scheduled, and people are finding it now. Um, but I'm glad to see people are beginning to find it. Let me see. I haven't done live too often. It's been a long time. I got to see how I pull up the chat and stuff. So forgive my poking around and everything else. All messages. And let's see if they come up. Um, anyway, if somebody wants to say something, feel free. So this week in the markets was pretty interesting. Again, we saw new highs. I'm going to talk a little bit about some stocks that I think are still undervalued, as well as silver. And I'll probably just ramble like my normal videos and then just post this as if it was the video. Again, I'm sorry that didn't interconnect properly to the one that was up there. Let's see what's going on. Why can't I see the? Never mind. How do we go back? Terrible. Anyway, I'll chat. Hopefully, if things come up, they come up, but I can't really see messages, so I apologize if I don't respond to people. And if you make some oh, there they go. Good morning. Cool. Okay, sounds good, Clyde. I'm glad you'll watch it later. I appreciate the support. So silver to me, which I'll start with, and then we'll talk about gloom and doomers and all the usual, and real estate, which I finally see some inventory coming in the market, which is kind of nice to see. So I think we'll possibly see a bit of a pullback in the real estate market. Rates have come down, but I haven't seen the demand go up the way that I would have expected when the rates came down, which is actually probably a good thing. It leads me to believe the Fed might have room to continue to cut, but I'm a little bit biased and I think of it in real estate terms. And the reality is it's much more intertwined to more things than just the real estate market. So I get hyper focused in it because that's what I do, and I have a good gauge on it because I can see the volume at the company that I work at from what the loan officers are doing, and I have a lot of realtor friends as well, and I can see their business as well. And as I see it not picking up, to me, that gives room for the Fed to continue to cut, but that doesn't necessarily connect. Like it has a lot more to do with that inflation being their number one issue, but the unemployment going up. How you doing, Korean Cardboard? Hope you're enjoying your Saturday. Um, that being said, I think the Fed continues to cut. I think the gloom and doomers are going to continue to talk about how the economy is collapsing because once they cut, that indicates a recession and all the things they always talk about. But I really don't see that being the case this time. I think the Fed's actually nailed it unless something else happens. And geopolitically, we have so many things going on, it's quite possible something else does happen. I mean, the war in Ukraine is still going on, even though nobody talks about it anymore. And the one in Israel seems to be escalating, although it's quieted down a bit lately. I guess we'll see as we move forward when Israel attacks back on Iran to counter their attack the other day and if and when they do, how that proceeds from there. I mean, at least they've indicated they're not going to target the oil or any of the um, what was it? It wasn't just the oil, but also the nuclear facilities. They're just going to target military operations. So if they stick to that, maybe it's just a small back and forth to save face with their constituents and their citizens more than anything else. Same on Iran's side. I mean, I'm guessing that they don't really want to do too much damage and have it escalate too much, but they still want to give some indication that, hey, we don't like what you're doing and kind of poke back and forth. So, silver. Why do I think silver's going higher? I don't have a great reason other than It's just lagged behind so long behind gold, and inflation's legitimate. So metals in general should be going higher, platinum as well, which has shocked me for the past 15 years being less expensive than gold. But silver, I really predict going to close to $100 an ounce. I've picked some up recently. It seems to be breaching new highs, not as aggressively as the gold market has. And I think gold probably continues as well, also for the same reason, which is government spending money, dollar's getting weaker. It should get weaker across other currencies as well. And it's not so much that I think the actual value of a gold or silver coin is going higher. It's that I think as your dollar is able to buy less goods, the value of the silver goes up because you're going to need more dollars to purchase these things. And I think that $100 has gotten to be such little money that it seems like that makes sense to me as to where silver will go, and it's so cheap at $30 an ounce that hard for me not to see it going further and further. So beyond that, I've talked about UPS a lot, and those of you who know my background, I'll talk for those who don't. I used to be a currency trader in Chicago. So I keep an eye on currencies still as well. I was at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I traded on the floor of the exchange, which was pretty cool, and it was a great experience. And I was very fortunate to have done real well, but it kind of impeded me for getting into the real world afterwards because it's very hard to work a 9 to 5 job after working on the exchange where it's kind of like playing a sport for a living or anything else and kind of a good camaraderie around the guys, which is pretty cool. Hey, pretty cool. Somebody from Bangladesh. Welcome about the farmer. Nice to see you guys. Wow. Pretty far away. That's awesome. Um, so the floor experience, while it was really cool, it also impeded me from like working a traditional job because it was very hard to work 8 hours a day and listen to anybody else. When I worked on the floor, it's kind of like what you see. It's people yelling and screaming. I actually used to teach the hand signal class as well. Um, but you become much more aware of price action than anything else. So when I watch stocks and I pay attention to markets, I'm very in tune with the price action. And I really limit the amount of companies that I watch because I don't want to try to think I can handle more than I can. I keep a close eye on about 10 or 20 companies and I look for the most important data is good news in a stock not going higher or bad news where it seems to not be going lower. I mean, you guys have heard me harp about Boeing a good bit, and that's partially because the news gets worse and worse and worse, and the stock really isn't cratering. Like, don't get me wrong, it's come down. I get that it's gone lower, but eventually that news goes away. Think like Chipotle years and years ago when they were having all the problems with the tainted food. The stock was getting beat up, but nobody was ever going to eat there again. But people have very short minds. They don't think about long term. So when the news is bad, eventually that ends. And when it ends, it lifts that selling pressure. Like the bad news causes all the sellers to come to the market, and if it's not going lower, that means there's enough demand by the smart money to be buying up the stock from the people who are selling it. Once that bad news is gone, stock is able to go back up. Nobody's really paying attention, and the less that it's in the news, the better. I've noticed that with Lululemon. They're not really in the news a whole lot, seem to have bottomed out. Yeah, I wasn't real thrilled to see that Bill Ackman bought Nike and that Warren Buffett bought the makeup company. What's the name of it? Sorry, I'm having a brain loss. Ulta Beauty, because both of those I think are probably oversold as well, and the news had gotten pretty bad, but the stocks didn't seem to be going much lower. The fact that they made those announcements, the stock shot back up. I still think that they're probably oversold and it's probably a good investment, but I don't love how they shot back up and that kind of bolstered it. Anyway, that what I was getting at is both Boeing and UPS have both been in that category. Boeing still has the bad news coming out, which is why I keep talking about it so much. UPS had the bad news come out and essentially sold off, and now it's been pretty quiet, which is what I like to see. and it's slowly beginning to go higher. The other one that I've noticed that nobody really talks about and is finally beginning to look like it might have some life is Cisco. But to be fair, the whole market seems to be going higher, which is what I love in general. I mean, I assume you guys like seeing when your things are starting to perform. How's it going, Billy? Nice to see you here. I don't know a whole lot about ELV, but I love the healthcare industry in particular. I was actually fortunate enough that I have Bristol Myers, Pfizer, and I'm fortunate enough that I also had Intuitive Surgical. It may have been the wrong decision with Pfizer and Bristol Myers. I had a AbbVie position on that I had for a long time, and I finally felt like it had gotten overstretched, so I sold out of the AbbVie position and went into Pfizer and Bristol Myers. And embarrassingly to admit for myself, it was primarily a dividend that I was getting over attractive to because both Bristol Myers and Pfizer were paying a better dividend than AbbVie. AbbVie's fallen enough that maybe it wasn't such a bad move, but the reality is AbbVie's probably a better company, and my general philosophy is buy the best companies and don't worry about the dividends, but I ignore my own advice. Sava, I love Merck, and yes, I think it looks cheap as well. I'm not real sure what it hey Mar- where I think it's going, but I think it's a good company. Uh, and then Marco from Zagreb, Croatia. Actually, we were there this summer for a little bit. I didn't actually, that's a lie. I didn't make it over to Zagreb, but we spent a few weeks in Croatia and we went all around. It's a beautiful country, just really expensive. I was kind of surprised. Um, Anyway, sorry, I lost track. But I like all the healthcare, and there's not a whole lot of things I don't like. You guys have to do an analysis of what your goals are for investing and invest accordingly. You know, recently I made a small bet into nuclear, which I made a tiny bet because I think it's really early in the stage and it might be a huge mistake and it might reverse and go back to zero. But seeing that Microsoft essentially bought 3 Mile Island's energy was really interesting to me. And now I'm seeing Amazon and some of the others start doing the same thing. And I have a feeling it's the beginning of a really long cycle. And if it runs the way that I hope it runs, I hope to really get 10, 20x on a small bet. I bought OKLO, which is a company I know absolutely nothing about, so I really don't suggest following my lead. In my mind, it was more like throwing money on a blackjack or craps table in some way. Um, and Korean cardboard, yeah, I still like AbbVie, and I love Pepsi as well, who I think is just a well diversified. If I'm getting into one of those spaces, not AbbVie or Pepsi, but if I'm looking at Pepsi, I really like Pepsi a lot more than Coke. I felt that way for a long time because Coca-Cola seems one-dimensional. I know that they have the best brand in the world or the most recognized logo in the world, and it's run really well. But I think Coke is pretty limited. Where Pepsi, if I remember correctly, you know, they're Taco Bell and they're Frito Lay's, and they've got some other things in there that I think give it a nice rounded out company. And then Chevron, I love. It's one of my largest holdings, um, and I've talked about adding on to it for the same reason. I've been selling weekly puts in it, figuring if I get taken and I get more shares, great. But I own a rather large position in Chevron as well, and it's one of my favorite companies right now. Forgive me. It's cold out here. Our weather really shifted here in Vegas. And then I don't know if you guys see my shorts that I've put up when I do stuff on the thing called Miracle League. The reason I'm out so early this morning is we have a 9 o'clock game. My wife and my son and I donate our time to help. It's a disabled kids and they play softball, baseball. It's a wiffle ball and it's really cool. I mean, it's kids who are in wheelchairs to ones who are in a competitive league. We coach a team of kids that are kind of in between, and it's just super fun and nice to get out there. Makes you feel really fortunate. Um, Give these families maybe an hour where the parents get a break from the kids. I try to do a short each week. Last week I videoed the chicken dance. So if you see those and you don't know what Miracle League is and it looks like some kid running around the bases, that's all it is. Um, I don't know a whole lot, Marco, about some of the royalty companies, but really anything that anybody's investing in, I think the economy is doing well, or whatever you're looking into. Um, I, what I hate most, I mean, you guys hear me talk about it sometimes. Um, it's funny I sold out of AbbVie. Yeah, Billy, you did the same thing as me. I mean, I don't know if I'm kicking myself or not because I think both of Pfizer and Bristol Myers are good companies. And Bristol Myers, I actually got in below 50, but Pfizer paid above 30 on, and it's doing nothing. And then sometimes I question why I even own those companies because am I better off just being more in Amazon and Google and Meta and things like that? But I feel like you have to round out a little and protect yourselves. So I tend to buy a little bit more. Um, Lamb Research, I don't know, but ASML, my buddy bought when it pulled back recently, and I think that's a really good purchase. The thing is, I don't know a ton about them, and I really do try to hyper focus on the companies I know and stick with the ones I think are the best of the best. I actually sucked it up and bought some Costco recently, which I can't stomach it because to me Costco is so overpriced, it makes no sense. Like why would I pay up like that? But I really forced myself to do what I talk about, which is just buy a little bit. Like, I don't need to put on a position I have a concern about. I'm fortunate enough that I can buy, 5 or 10 shares and not even think about it. And if it drops, that puts it in my radar where I'll pick it up as opposed to just totally not paying attention. And then I try to be careful about if a company like that starts to drop, is there something fundamental changing in the company, or is it just emotional? And is it creating a good opportunity, or something actually coming along where they have legitimate new competitors? For instance, I look at Google and the pullback it's having, and at least to me, and you guys know, like you have to do your own research, so on and so forth, because I don't want the investment advice. But at least to me, it looks like a good opportunity with Google. I think the Department of Justice and the lawsuit, I don't want to say it's silly because it's legitimate, but I really think if Google gets broken up, the parts are probably worth more than what the whole is, and you probably end up in a better situation anyway. Now, I would rather stay it as one big conglomerate because I think that gives them more money to invest in the small offshoots that have a real potential of, 100xing, like doing something really outside of the box and maybe they get lucky and it hits, versus breaking them up where they may not have the same revenue coming in, each individual part being its own company and making or losing whatever it makes or loses. That being said, at least at today's value, I think getting the broken up components of Google is probably worth a lot more money as an investor than having Google. So if the Department of Justice wins that lawsuit and breaks them up, probably end up in a better position. And if they don't, well, you own Google, and I think right now with that weighing on it, it's probably a good value. Um, Anyway, Chevron, I see it's come up a couple times. Yeah, I just think the pricing's a good value right here. It seems like people. So I bought Exxon years ago when it was having terrible news, which goes along with what I was saying, and it seemed like it was paying a high dividend. I was over attracted to the dividend, and maybe they were having real troubles, but it was really fortunate. I reversed out of the Exxon into Chevron, and I had a little bit of Chevron as well because my thought was, again, the dividend in Chevron is better right now. It seems a little bit out of favor compared to Exxon. And lately, oil seems to be getting a bad rep, and I'm not really sure why because I don't see anything changing for a long time. Even if there's more and more electric vehicles, which I that's our family is 100% electric vehicles, and I still like Chevron. there's so many things that still use oil and gas from planes and boats and trucks and like pretty much everything else does. And I think the more energy that's created, the more that gets used. I don't think that means that we're going to stop using a certain resource because something else comes along and the technology starts to change. And even if it does, the cycle's going to take a long time. I was listening to, I don't even know the name of it, but that duck guy or that chicken who's an energy expert. And really, he has good information. It's just hard to look at the caricature and the voice that they mask. And he was talking about that, and I think he's 100% right that if something else comes along to quote unquote replace oil, that's going to make oil exceptionally well priced, causing there to be more demand. And you'll see like our old cars move to countries that need automobiles and aren't as wealthy as the US. So you won't see the usage drop. You'll just see the demand of overall energy go up, which reminds me back to the nuclear part. I was looking at it and I saw them start talking about it on CNBC and saw that, I think it was Google who bought 3 Mile Island, which had our biggest collapse, nuclear waste. I actually grew up in New York when 3 Mile Island happened. And here they are putting it back, and they're not, my understanding is they're not the plant that actually had the meltdown. They're opening up the ones that around it and the other ones that are working real well. But it shows you how much demand these AI structures are needing that they're willing to go back into nuclear to start investing in that so they have enough energy to run their AI um, plants. So their I don't know what to call it, big warehouse, whatever you want to call it, servicers. So there's so much energy being used, they can't get enough, and now they're going into nuclear. I think this is just the beginning of that cycle because they haven't even started using it. They're just getting the things in place to be able to have access to that energy in order to be able to use nuclear energy to run those facilities. Uh, I can't even imagine how much energy, like they've said it. I understand it has a number that's really large, but if Google is buying 3 Mile Island and Amazon is working other deals with other nuclear companies, and this is the first comments that they're making about it on CNBC, my guess is this cycle is going to run for, I don't know, 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years. And you might see some huge opportunity in some of these small nuclear companies. Again, the one that I bought, I know nothing about the company. From what I read, they just kind of clean the nuclear, make sure it's safe, and things like that. But I put in such little money, it really is a gamble. And I think this nuclear is the beginning of of some new wave of energy being used for these companies. I don't know. What do you guys think? Anybody have an opinion on the nuclear side of things? Um, I'm not looking to place a big bet on it, but I figure I'll put a little in and see how it goes. You know, for the most part, you guys know what I always talk about is the best of the best. I try to put 70% of my investment into what I consider the best companies. And so you guys know it's Amazon, Google, Meta, Chevron. I have Starbucks in there, Microsoft, Palo Alto Networks, Intuitive Surgical. Those are my main ones. It's hard for me to think of any other that are the really big investments. And I try to put a chunk in what I think are the best of the best because I think if you wait 20 or 30 years, it pays off to be in the best companies. From there, I then have a separate account that I primarily focus on dividends, which the bulk of it is in an ETF that's PFFA, which nobody likes because it's got a high operating cost to it. But the reality is it's done real well and it pays a nice dividend. I recently rotated out of OHI, which is a REIT that deals in they have medical facilities for primarily old age homes, but they don't run the homes. They own the land and they build the properties out for people who know how to run the facilities, and then they pay rent essentially or mortgages on those properties. And I figure as our population gets older, there's more and more demand for that. The thing is, it had a huge run up, so I rotated out of it into Devon Energy. And then the other one that I have is, which I've talked about on the channel. Oh, one of my other top holdings is NEE, which is Nextera Energy. But then the one that I've talked about on the channel is NEP, which is Nextera Energy Partners. The risk with Nextera Energy Partners is they have contracts with NEE that expire at the end of 2026 or 2020, early 2027. Um, the concern is with higher interest rates and higher costs associated with they do wind and solar forgive me, I got ahead of myself. NextEra Energy is the energy company in Florida. NEP is their affiliate company that does wind and solar only. They actually sold their natural gas pipelines because they wanted to go to 100% regenerative. Um, and they have contracts with NEE to sell the power to them, and where rates were and their borrowing capacity being so or not capacity, but the rates being so low, they were able to get really good return. There was bad news essentially saying that their projections on how quickly they'll be able to raise the dividend were a little higher than they estimated. This collapsed NEP. It dropped to a point where it ended up paying 15% or 16% yield, and I figured it was well worth the risk because NEE is a pretty good energy company, and I didn't picture them allowing that company to get out of business or do poorly. I was pretty shocked. I contacted the company and said, hey, are you guys running into trouble? Uh, I'll, I plan to keep it coming, John, and I see your question. I'll let you know about ET in a minute, Korean cardboard. Um, I couldn't believe when I contacted them that they set up a meeting, and I had about a week later or so, I had a FaceTime with one of the people. Now, NEP doesn't actually have employees, but it was one of the directors at NEE who really talked me through what was going on. Now, he could only make me feel comfortable that the contracts in place would pay out what they would pay out, and they don't know what to expect afterwards. And when I asked some of the questions about the higher interest rates and the cost to borrowing, that kind of was the concern from them is it's not a 0% interest rate environment, so it's gonna cost more to be able to build more solar and build more wind. So the higher cost to build the projects is gonna offset some of the dividends they're able to pay, which is why they thought that they wouldn't be able to raise the dividends at the rate that they'd be able to, and they lowered it from like 6%, 8% to 6% for how quickly they thought they could raise the dividend. Well, here I am looking at it, seeing that it pays about 15 or 16%. And the bad news is they're only going to be able to raise that at a 6% increase, and thought, oh, that seems pretty good to me. Now, when I've read analyst reviews separate from the conversation I've had from him, their concern is when those contracts are done, that they're going to end up being only a 6% return. At the same time, if I can pick something up that pays me 15% for the next couple of years, and then the bad news is that they're only going to pay 6%, I'm okay owning that in my dividend account. Eh, Now, Korean, I like MLPs and I like ET. I haven't done enough research on where the price valuation is and seeing if I think it's going higher from here. But again, I think the market's pretty good, and I don't really see a whole lot of things struggling that much. Um, and what I talk about in the videos all the time, the reason I hate those gloom and doomers is when I read the comments and everybody's so easily, the government sucks, my boss sucks, my pay is terrible. Like, I think it puts them in a rut and doesn't put their head in the right place that it doesn't matter if there's a correction. You're better off saving either way. I would hate to see somebody not saving because they're waiting for some big recession and some big correction. Hopefully, everybody could be in the position. I know it's not realistic that there's just money for this and there's money for that. Like, I get that. But I'd rather see people putting money away all the time, and then if the economy corrects, continuing to put away. Trying to time it like that and not putting money into the markets, I find creates a bad habit of not putting money in. It doesn't help them get to a better level. And then they're selling what sells on YouTube, which is hyperbolic. Oh, the sky is falling, the economy sucks, there's too much credit card debt, there's too much debt in this, the government's spending too much. Like those are all true. So it's really easy sales. And the inflation, like I'm sure you guys hate it too. I mean, everywhere I go is a bit of a sticker shock. But the earnings are really good. The companies are doing just fine. It seems like things are chugging along, and putting people in a rut where they can just complain and say how the world sucks. I don't see any value in that. I'd rather see them save, and if the economy collapse, hopefully put money in at lower prices and own more shares. Um, Marco, I love the question. How are things going with moving to Japan path? So Marco must have seen one of my other videos. My son loves Japan. I, I constantly fantasize about moving to out of the country. I don't know that it would be Japan. It'd probably be Southeast Asia, but somewhere where our dollar goes further. So the reality is, Marco, I won't know until around March or April. He I don't wanna mess with my son's life. He's 13 years old. He's doing really well. He has a good group of friends. He does much better than I ever did in school. I was just, I don't know, knew I hustled pretty good. But he gets great grades. He's in this accelerated program. It's a magnet program, whatever that means here in Las Vegas, and goes to a school that has great teachers, and he's applied to a school here that so have his like group of friends that are really good. And if they get in, I would hate to pull him out and have him not. Yeah, that's my thought. I don't want to just make the change for my own reasons. So if he gets into the school he wants to, I don't see us making the move. At the same time, he loves Japan so much that it's possible we still go. So what I've done is I actually bought some Japanese yen because I was happy with where the price was, just in case. And my attitude is, if he doesn't get the school, I'll leave the decision to him. He thinks it's an exciting opportunity. uh, he asks about it still, and has kind of said if he gets into the school he wants to get into, that he would rather go there. But if he doesn't, he might like the idea of doing a year in Japan. And my attitude is, I can work remotely, and what an opportunity. So if it happens, that'd be great, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. I think half of it's just my brain liking to fantasize. Anyway, so I think the economy is doing just fine, and I wouldn't be so scared. Like the gloom and doomers are gloom and doomers. I think the housing market seems to be holding up pretty well. I think we could see a correction there because the prices do seem pretty high, especially living here in Las Vegas. They seem to have gotten extended, but uh, they're not so ridiculous. Like it was overly cheap. I think going forward that will be expensive for a long time. Thanks, Marco. I appreciate that. And then other areas across the country, if you check, like it's super localized. If you go to Ohio or you go to, I think there'll be real opportunity in Florida. But if you go to Ohio or Pennsylvania, I think real estate's still really reasonably priced. OBDC. You know, it's an interesting one, Korean cardboard. JEPQ. Oh, Bill, yeah, I went to Da Nang. I've been in I spent 17 or 18 days in Vietnam and really enjoyed it. I don't have a huge desire to go back. But last summer we did Japan, was it the year before? Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, and I'm forgetting one other. But we spent a long time, which is where the idea of moving to Japan comes from. Like I can work remotely, so I can still keep up with some work and have some fun with my family exploring the world. I didn't get to go to Thailand. I really want to. Um, I'm hoping so. So my wife's Chinese, and this summer her parents, they live here, but they want to go back home for the summer, and of course they invited us, which is cool because then I can stay at their apartment, which is nice, and stay with family and stuff. But while we're in China, we're hoping to go to Thailand and Korea as well. Thailand's been one I've been wanting to visit because you know, I see these videos of people moving there and retiring, and I hate to say it, YouTube is a place I watch the videos as much as I talk about it. "Oh, how is Bangkok? Do you love it?" That's cool. Um, and I'll answer about what I was gonna say about JetQ. In general, was it Korean Cardboard who said that? I don't love covered call strategies, and part of it is I can sell calls myself, and part of it is it limits the upside. Y- JEPQ and JEPE have both done quite well, so I don't want to say anything negative about them. And like you, I'm super attracted to the yield, and they haven't had a whole lot of depletion as well, so they've done exceptional. I just don't love the idea of owning all the underlying stocks of the Qs or the S&P or certain, group of them and then selling the calls against them, and I don't really trust somebody else to do it for me. The expense ratios are pretty low. They seem to have done great. So I don't want to talk anybody out of them. I just don't want to do them myself. I sell calls about against probably a quarter of my position anyway, and then I'll sell puts to get back in. So I don't mind doing it myself. Yeah, I get it. That's why I said I wouldn't want to talk anybody out of it. It has a good yield and it has a low expense ratio. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just one of those things that I don't personally have. Billy, I'd be really interested to know about Hua Hin. Um, I, I'm hoping we get there this summer too. I I don't know that we'll be able to with visiting family and stuff. It's going to be a tough juggle. We'll probably go for a pretty long time frame, so you would think we would have the time, but I really don't know just because I don't know what'll happen with visiting her family and how long we'll get to stay with them or it's when we go out to dinner like it's cool. Her uncle was a developer there, so we'll go see some projects and stuff that he did. Um, and I haven't been to China in probably 15 years. She was fortunate to go back maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and when she came home, I couldn't believe like listening to how much it changed, and I hate to admit how much more advanced than us it sounded. To get a little bit political, not really political. Some of the things I've seen in other countries with where everybody's on video all the time, as much as us as Americans would frown at that, thinking it imposes on our rights, it creates for a much cleaner and safer environment. It's really nice to go to these places where their subways are clean and, you know, in Singapore, they're overly punitive. On the wall, it said, I think it was like I think forgive, I'll make up the number because I don't remember, but it was big, like a $250 fine for eating or drinking on a train, and I think it was $1,000, if not, it was only 500 for if you're caught smoking. At the same time, it was awesome, like, you feel really safe. Our propaganda makes it sound like these places are third world, and they're scary, and they're dangerous, and, oh, but you don't have to worry, there is no gun violence, like, maybe you get pickpocketed or something like that, and I don't mean to downplay it, because sure, that would suck, but everywhere is clean and people are polite, and you don't have the, uh, forgive me, I'm old, bums in New York. I don't know if there's a more politically correct way of saying it, but the people in the subway area chasing you around and, like, it's totally different. Me too, Billy. Like I love that area. I'm excited to go back this summer. I'm excited to see my wife's family, but I'm hoping we have time to go over to Thailand. And she, like I said, she wants to go over to Korea as well. And I've never been to Korea, so that'd be pretty cool. Or Thailand. We went all over the other places. It's cool to see that you guys have been there a bunch too. And like I said, I'm interested in Hua Hin because my god, when I see the properties over there, the deals that you can get, it just looks beautiful. I mean, I think I will. I'll let you know. I mean, we're hoping this summer, to be honest. But I don't know how many days. I think she said it's only an hour and a half flight or something from China. Her family's in Qingdao, and we were talking about doing like a long weekend, or potentially we were looking at a camp for my son to go to while we're in China because one of his friends might be going, and one of the ones that he's applying to the same school at. That's why I said he's got this great group of friends. They hang out. It's kind of cool. I'd hate to break that up out of my desire, maybe do a year, maybe move indefinitely to these other countries and just kind of explore the world. That's not his dream, that's mine. So it's not fair to put on him. The one thing is, I said to my wife, like, what's the worst that happens? There is no worst. Either we go and we hate it and we're excited to come back home, or we go and we love it and we don't want to come back home. Like, either one is good information. Um, but I'm hoping to get to Korea this summer. So I'll let you know. Um, if he does the school, we talked about maybe going during the week while he's busy with his camp. And if he wants to come with us, maybe we do a long weekend or something since it's so close. Um, but Billy, feel free to instant message or however, I don't know what, or email me. I'm assuming the information's on YouTube. If not, uh, just if you, it's adam.con at Noble Home Loans is my email. Feel free to email me there too. I'd love to hear about the trip because uh, I totally want to visit Thailand and Korea. The reason I want to do the Japan for a year is the opportunity to go all over the place. And yeah, I worried about getting sick in Cebu and stuff. Anyway, markets. So UPS, I think, is going higher. I think it seems to be making a nice bottom here. I think the bad news has gotten out for the most part. And what I'm hoping is it just stays kind of quiet. They have earnings coming up somewhat soon. I'm guessing their earnings are going to start looking better and better. Part of what I think is, especially for like, UPS, Target, a lot of retail. I don't pay close attention to Walmart or what's the other one that owns Home Goods, and TJ Maxx. Like TJ Maxx has just been flying, which I think could continue. But I think as we get closer to Christmas, people are going to be pretty surprised that Christmas is going to be Christmas and the sales are going to be good. And UPS is going to be all a part of it. And that's how I feel, Billy. Like, as those presents and packages start going out and the earnings look just fine and they've already let go some employees, like, they're really best of best. I mean, maybe they compete with FedEx, but I think UPS is a really well run, great logistics company, and I don't really see them having the trouble that their stock price is indicating. And for me, picking it up down here, again, over sensitive to the dividend, paying over a 5% dividend. And when I look at it, it seems pretty able to pay that dividend even when they slowed down and the sales weren't looking as good. So as things normalize, which I think is what's going to happen, yeah, I think it goes back to where it drifts higher and it'll be more sensitive to the dividend as the Fed cuts rates and you start to not be able to make as much in T bills and CDs and treasuries and bonds. Wouldn't you rather a stock that pays a dividend, um, and one that was paying 5%? The price will probably make sense where now it's paying closer to 3 or 4%, which hopefully means price drifts higher. The other one that I've noticed lately, and I love because nobody talks about it, but it's finally creeping out of a bottom that it's made for probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 years, is Cisco. I think Cisco is just a company that nobody really talks about. That every AI company is going to end up needing them or using them because they're really good at what they do. And the reason they were the number one flyer in the internet bubble is because they're good at what they do. It's been long enough now that I think that bottom is just so solid that it's hard to imagine them dropping below what did it get down to? Maybe $45 a share, $47 a share. I know it's about $10 higher and it's not the dead low, but it's hard for me to imagine Cisco going into some terrible rut and just being in big trouble. And if they start going higher, I picture that they'll make new highs and do kind of what Microsoft did real quietly. And the next thing you know, they're going to be some huge flying money making company. I could be totally wrong on it. I just know when companies make that long of a base, when they finally start going the other way, it tends to be able to go a long time. Um, Billy, so you have 30 to 35 stocks. That's a lot of, well, I guess it's not so bad. I've been working really hard lately and going with less companies. I found that I had what I would consider too many. And I did an exercise with one of my friends who, he's in similar financial position as me. So we always tend to talk about investments and the markets and makes it fun because we both enjoy it. But I told him to list his top 10 stocks and he rattled off the first 5 to 8 of them like that. But even the top 10, he had to really think a long time about his number 9 and number 10. And what I've thought is if I actually want to outperform, and I don't know what my goal is, that's why I say people have to figure out what their goal is. I should really be hyper focused in the ones that I rattle off right off the top of my head if I think they're the best companies and going to outperform. If I just wanna do what the market is, since I like buying individual stocks, sure, I should stick with what I enjoy, but half of me thinks maybe I should just buy SPY and QQQ and put a percentage of each of my investments in those. Like, I would gear a little heavier towards QQQ, which at my age is probably a mistake. I'm probably better off with a larger percentage in SPY. But I'd probably just go 60/40 in those 2 ETFs, which really covers pretty much everything, and then not think about it. It's just that I enjoy the markets too much, and I wanna think about it. Hey, Russ, nice to see you here. Yeah, I do love the idea. I The ETFs undermine my idea. So, part of the discussion I did this recently with, I had a SEP IRA that I bought 100 years ago, back when I was trading. That I've been too lazy to move over to one of my my E Trade account. It finally transferred over last week, and I stuffed it in. I bought 3 stocks, and it's a decent size. uh, it's $150,000 account, and I bought Google, I bought SMCI, and I bought Amazon, and I just plowed into those three and didn't spread out into anything else because I want to outperform. And I said to my brother, I was almost tempted, and I know this, to put all of it in SMCI. Now, SMCI is probably the dumbest of the dumb and the biggest risk, and it could go to zero. But if my attitude was, if I really wanna crush it and outperform, I don't wanna spread out too much, because if I spread out too much, there's been studies done that anything more than 16 stocks, if I remember correctly, I think it was 16, is pretty much just buying the market. So you may as well just pick a couple of ETFs and do that. I just enjoy it too much. I like paying attention to these companies, and when I buy Amazon, I actually feel like, it sounds so stupid, or McDonald's or whatever it is. I feel like I own part of the company. I know that it's such a microscopic percentage. It's silly, but for whatever reason, I do. So I like owning the companies more than the ETFs. Now, if I want to protect my investment, and I think the ETFs are a much better route to go. But to be fair, right now I'm focusing more and more on trying to outperform. And the reality is, with my age and my position, I should be focusing more on protection and slowly moving into dividends and worrying about my family. But I still have that desire to outperform. So I've actually started hyper focusing. And I don't know if you are already sitting or not, where I've started pressing more is stocks I like the best, which is Amazon, Google, Meta, Chevron, Starbucks. I have Intuitive Surgical, Palo Alto Networks, Microsoft. Like those are the ones I really plow into the most, and probably 80% of or 70% of my investment in that. Cool at age 32. Fortunately, Meta is partially when it fell to below $100 a share, I put on a really big position. I wasn't fortunate enough to get in below 100, but I started buying it small around 200, and when it got to about 120 is when I was like, "Okay, screw it." Meta's a good company and they make a lot of money. It scared me when it got below 100 because then I started thinking, "Well, what am I missing here?" But I held it almost I held all of it until I sold a couple of 500 calls somewhat recently and got taken on the calls and was immediately kicking myself because my attitude was I wanted to own that thing until it made me a gazillionaire. I think Mark Zuckerberg is well hated, and I think that helps keep the stock price pretty reasonable. Um, I'll have to look at ELV. Is the dividend growing at a high rate? Is that what you like about it? What is it with ELV and QQQM? Yeah, I know they haven't had a huge return as of recent, but the Nasdaq is a so part of why I talk about maybe it's I should just go into the Qs and SPY is in some ways it's almost like cheating. Yeah, that's so good increase in the dividend. Um, they're constantly rotating. So you're always getting the top 100 stocks in the QQQs and the top 500 in the SPYs. As a company does worse and falls out, like they drop it out and you don't own it anymore. And any up and coming stock that's growing at a fast rate, well, that gets put into it. And then you own Nvidia and ones. Actually, I have a tiny bit of that and ones that you may not buy because you think they're overpriced that may just continue to perform. So to me, in some way, the Qs and the SPYs really just cover pretty much everything. I know VOO and SCHD and all of those, they're similar and have great companies in them as well. So any of it is a great way to protect your investment. Um, and it should be the direction I head towards. I've just been going the opposite direction for now just to try to see if I can really crush it. Um, Hershey is a big guy. Oh, Big Buy. Yeah, I was thinking candy, big guy for sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think Hershey too. There's actually as much as people are talking about the market being overpriced, with the broadening out that I've seen and the prices that I look at, I think there's a lot of opportunity right now. I think there's a lot of companies that look inexpensive, and it's finally broadening it out to include them. That anything you've been watching that you think is cheap, I think it probably is. And I even think you might see it rotate out of some of those big caps that I like so much into some of those other things, which is why I like UPS. But Hershey's fits right in there as well. Like, I think all of these companies that pay a decent dividend that have been out of favor, you might see that rotation just continue. Now, it'll be volatile and you'll see big ups and downs, especially with the mega caps, where they'll look like they're going straight back up. But I think you'll see as they go back up, that'll create a selling opportunity for you to move back into some of those other things that were underperforming. The reason I push into those other ones is I'm trying to have a 5 or 10-year time horizon, and I really do think over 10 years, a company like Amazon is just gonna continue to dominate unless they get split up. But but I think right now, things like Hershey's and UPS and even Target, I would like it back down at 130, not here at 150s or 160s, but all of these companies are growing and doing well and gonna continue to and outperform what the markets think, and they were so out of favor for so long that once they start going higher, I just think they do. Verizon and AT&T, my God, nobody's paying attention and they're finally creeping higher and higher. And Verizon still pays close to a 6% dividend. And I know everybody needs to own an Apple phone, but they also are going to have to use either AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile. The only reason I don't love T-Mobile is it was the favorite and it seems to be overpriced. So let's see. This is where AIM at. SCHD, SPY. Yeah, yeah, kind of my point. I think that's a great strategy and it's going to protect your money. Financial advice, but I think it really protects you because it gives you a huge diversified portfolio with only a few things and you don't even really have to pay attention to it. Like to me, if you own those things, you've bought the market. So you could really put in any dollar amount spread out in those percentages and not have to think about it. The only reason I haven't geared towards doing that is, like I said, I still enjoy the markets too much. And I still trade on a day basis. I get in and out of things and constantly am doing that just because of my old habits from the trading floor. Um, it was awesome. I, the reality is the only this stuff, technology, is what ruined it. Otherwise, I'd still be down there trading. Um, I don't know if you guys have seen videos and the ones they put on CNBC and stuff. What's funny to me about it, even the ones they use today, which are getting less and less common, are from back when I was trading because they don't have videos today. Nobody's down there, and anybody down, at least at the mercantile exchange, is just sitting on a computer screen punching numbers. When I was trading, it was in the transition period, like computers weren't really used, and trading what was called open outcry. So if you wanted to put a trade in, most normal people, which is what I was, you would call up your broker or whatever it was, tell them what currency you wanted to buy or sell. They would then put it in an order that would then print on some printer and people. Now, if you were one of the companies and you were a bank or somebody else, you could call directly and be on the phone with somebody who could quote the market, and then you would use the hand signals to put the trade into the pit. And then we all did it pretty much on the honor system. I mean, you have little pieces of paper. Somebody would say, "Hey, my name was Slim," kind of helped break me into the pit. It was kind of funny. But if somebody sells it and I buy it, I write down my buys on the card. You then, every 15 minutes, hand that over to the clerk who brings them upstairs, punches them into the computer. But that was the extent of computers. People weren't trading on computers. That also gave opportunity. The markets got more and more out of whack because, for the most part, the big banks determine where the currencies are because they're trading in New York against what we're trading in Chicago. So when the dollar yen goes up, the yen against the dollar goes down. We traded the yen against the dollar, and the guys in New York were trading the dollar yen and on headsets directly with the pit, keeping the market in line. But when it's slow, they're not really paying attention. So markets had room to move a little bit more than what they do now that it's all online. Cool. Greetings from Bavaria. Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying the channel. So that created opportunity, and just the flow of the paper orders, the orders coming into the pits to buy and sell the currency, we were 2 bid at 4 all day long. And the more trades you could make, the more you could make. And it just was a lot of fun. As computers came around, like anything else, you don't really see it coming, you see it coming. All of a sudden, guys in the pit had these handhelds, and you could see the prices like up on the board of where it was trading on the computer. And in my example of like the pit's 2 bid at 4, you would see they were like around that. So maybe they were 0 bid, so 2 points lower, and they were offering it 6, so they're 2 points higher on the sell side. Which is why you didn't recognize that that was the route things were going because the markets looked worse than ours. So who would ever trade on there? The thing is, obviously, over time, it moved to computer trading, which made the floor kind of obsolete. And you watched it slowly change as all of a sudden it quickly changed. It was like all of a sudden over the 6-month period, you watched 50 or 60% of the volume go from the pit to the computer. And then it was down to like 90% were trading on the computer. And now that it's on the computer and the bank traders in New York can constantly just be updating their bids and offers on the computer, the market has gotten so tight and it's so hard to make a living trading online. And the other thing it traded, Adam is a I'm a more of a, you are not a performer. You are what is it? A welder who happens to invest. And I really enjoy your channel. So you're not a performer. I think you have really good advice. Um, but so one of the big advantages of the floor is the bank traders. You know, you work with the same guys every day. They knew that as a guy who was just making markets, whatever I'm doing, so forgive my brain, it goes back to floor trading. So I'm bidding 2 on 5, 2 on 5. They know that that doesn't necessarily mean I want to buy 5 contracts at the two. It just means that's where the market is. So I'm making a market to keep like liquidity there. So if all of a sudden their bank trader in New York tells them they're at one or they're at zero, so the market's lower, they would just walk in the pit and be like at two, at one, and they would make eye contact, giving you the opportunity to buy if you wanted to buy with them. But it wasn't like you had to. And since we knew they dictated where the market was, well, most of the time you would just kind of put your hand down and bid a little bit lower. Now that it's on a computer screen, if you put that order in and the market is 10 points lower than what you're bidding, well, you're just filled and it's 10 points against you. That's a huge disadvantage when I was used to just buying and selling and buying and selling and buying and selling. Um, so when I was in Chicago Korean Cardboard, I lived in Lincoln Park for a while, and then I moved a little bit further west and was off of, depending on how well you know the area, it was kind of what the Polish area was off of Chicago and Ashland. Um, as the city was growing, I thought that area might have created some opportunity for real estate. I was right, but I was wrong by a couple of blocks. It's interesting that there's a place called the East Bank Club that was like warehouse ghost land, like nothing there. That, that I wish I moved there because you could have bought things for like pennies, and all of a sudden they put in these like multi-million dollar, like 1,000 square foot places for $2 million. So it just took off, and it was probably, I don't know, 3 blocks east of where I ended up moving from. Because my buddy lived in a townhouse, like there were 7 units in the building that I thought looked like great opportunity, right off of Chicago and Ashland, which I like that area, but I like Lincoln Park and I love Chicago. It was fun, other than I don't miss the cold. Anyway, I do have my Miracle League today. For those of you who stopped in. In the future, I'm going to have to time it better. I might end up doing my Saturdays as live instead of just doing the video because it's more fun to have some interaction. Maybe one day I can figure out a way and I'll interview Russ too, who has an awesome channel. I don't know if you guys watch him, but if you don't, go check him out and subscribe. I really like his stuff, and you know, his our friend, I went to lunch with Ryan one day too. I like him as well. But for sure, check out their channels. Um, I just won't be consistent at the same time because part of why I came at this early in the morning is the Miracle League's at 9 in the morning, but some days it's in the afternoon, and my schedule is just never consistent. And I really do the YouTube because it's fun, and if it doesn't, I know I have a lot of subscribers, but it doesn't make like it doesn't do well, which is interesting. Either way, I don't. It may not be consistent because I don't know what time I'll have the Miracle League, and I never know when I have time. But I like the live. Yeah, I know. Well, you need to move here in Vegas, Russ. I'm telling you, the first few months, just even the more sunshine than there is in Illinois, like I had tons of energy, and you get used to the warm weather. Like people talk about, oh, it must suck in the summer. You get a lot more used to that than the other way around. And sorry, I'll ramble for a bit, but I really have to do go to the have to go to the Miracle League because we do coach a team. Um, I was that kid who used to run around in shorts in the winter, and my mom would make fun of me. Like, I loved the cold. So it's really interesting that I moved to Las Vegas. I've adapted to the heat because I will tell you what, 110 degrees with no humidity blows away 80 or 85 with like 90% humidity. When I was going back to New York visiting my mom and the humidity, it's just like, ugh, you have to shower like 3 times a day. Here in Vegas, it's amazing. Like, you don't sweat. It's so dry even when it gets hot. It's kind of nice. It just goes right off of you. You don't have that same feeling. And now that I've acclimated to the hot, it's hard. Like, I can't even go back to Illinois in November for Thanksgiving because it's just too cold for me, and I don't even have the clothes anymore. So you adapt to the hot so much quicker that now I'm, like, terrible in the cold. So, yeah, if I could recommend it, for sure, I'd come out here. I wish you did when years ago when it was super cheap. Yeah, but it's not too hot. That's what I mean, Korean. Like, you get used to it because what they say about the dry heat, I know it sounds so stupid, like, it's true. Like, I don't know how to explain. It doesn't really get hot until it's above 108, 109, like, that's when it starts to get hot. But at 105, I don't understand it. It isn't as bad. Like, if I weren't living here and somebody told me it was 105, thanks, Dan, sorry. Um, if somebody told me it was 105, I I would have thought, that sounds absurdly hot, but after living here, it's amazing how it isn't. No, Dan's cool, I'd rather know your name. I just it comes up the way it comes up, and I didn't know. And I'm guessing I've seen in the comments, and I've responded to that. For some reason, YouTube sometimes uses people's screen name and sometimes actually says what their name is. I don't know what their algorithm is or how it works as to why it does it that way. Anyway, I'm gonna boogie because I gotta go wake my son up so we can get to this charity stuff we do, which is super cool. And again, I'll try to do live chat next Saturday because it's fun, and I'll try to schedule it. I don't know if it worked where I, I don't think it came up right where I was able to just transition into the one that I scheduled a half hour before I started, or if I started a new one. But I'll see if I can figure that out. Thanks, guys. Have a great week and feel free to reach out any way you like or make comments. Bye bye.